Dr. Raza Ibrahim, Vice Chairman of the Malay Heritage Foundation, MHF, respected speakers and moderator, and all dear respected guests, a very good morning to everyone. A warm welcome and thank you for joining us today on this lovely Saturday morning for this Sembang Ilmu Plus or SIP Plus lecture. I am Tauhid, your MC for today, representing MHF. Today marks the third SIP Plus session where we hear ideas and perspectives on how arts and cultural heritage can be an important bridge and social glue that fosters deep understanding and cohesion among Singaporeans. Previously, the inaugural SIP Plus lecture entitled Art and Heritage for/in Society was held on 18th June last year at the Arts House. The second session, Recreation of Heritage, Looking at the Past for the Future, took place earlier this year on 28th January at the National Library. Today, we are all back at this lovely Aliwal Arts Centre venue for this session entitled Community Building Through Cultural Arts. We would like to thank all participants for your continued support of this series. Special mention, of course, to Andika Warisan Temasek Foundation for supporting all our SIP Plus sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I reckon none of you are here to hear me speak for long. So allow me to introduce our guest moderator for today, Ms. Liana Nashita Shukarman. Ms. Liana is a project manager who graduated with a Masters of Arts from the Malay Studies Department and US with research focused on colonial and indigenous Malay knowledge production in the Malay archipelago. Her research interests includes developmental studies and the relationship between literature and society. A former dancer in traditional and contemporary Malay dance, although she won't be dancing for us today, I believe. Anyways, Ms. Liana has a deep passion and enthusiasm for the Malay language, literature, heritage and culture. She was previously appointed as Teman Warisan or Cultural Heritage Ambassador by the Malay Heritage Foundation in 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Ms. Liana Nashita.
Hi, good morning everyone. Thank you Tauhid for the introduction and also to Malay Heritage Foundation for inviting us today. My name is Liana and also thank you for spending time on a Saturday morning like this to join us today. Good morning to MHF Vice Chairman Dr. Azhar Ibrahim and also fellow guests. Okay, so I think today we have three speakers with us to discuss how our arts is important in bridging our society, right? Be it the youth, the elderly and what have you in Singapore, yeah? Okay, so before we start, maybe it's important to revisit the title of this series. It's called Sembang Ilmu. So it's actually a very catchy name that MHF has came up with. So Sembang Ilmu, what's Sembang Ilmu? So in Malay, it refers to discussing. Sembang is to talk casually, right? Ilmu is knowledge. So Sembang Ilmu is to discuss about knowledge in a casual and relaxed manner, because when you talk about knowledge, right? People have this thinking that, it's a very formal setting, it's a classroom setting where you receive information and knowledge. But you can always discuss something very important in a very relaxed and casual way. Yeah. So Sembang Ilmu, the series has been going on for some time now, and it's one of MHF's signature programs. Yeah. Okay. So today with us this morning, we have several guests. Yeah, to join us to discuss the topic on community building through cultural arts. Okay. So we have Ms. Shilpa, AP Tan, and Miss Aziza this morning with us, okay, to discuss how the arts and cultural heritage can be an important bridge and social glue for Singapore. Right, there are many different things that can bind us together. And I think arts and cultural heritage is one of them. It's a big aspect in any society. Yeah. And okay, so later, each speaker will be given 15 to 20 minutes for their presentation. Yeah. And first up, we will invite our first speaker, Ms. Shilpa, who will be sharing about the role and potential of poetry in bringing together a society. So maybe allow me to give some introduction about Ms. Shilpa. She's a former computer professional and a bilingual poet from Singapore. She's a Pushcart and Best of the Net nominee and author of the poetry collection Between Sips of Masala Chai. Let's now welcome Ms. Shilpa, please.
Thank you, Liana, for that kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Malay Heritage Foundation, for having me here. It's such an honor to be here to speak about something which is very close to my heart, which is poetry. And the topic of my lecture is unboxing communities through poetry. Yeah. So, okay. Okay. Before we go on to just a small little thing about myself. Well, I moved to Singapore in 2001. I'm married and I have two lovely girls, blessed with them. I started writing in 2009 after my dad passed away. I self-published my collection first and it was well received. I was invited to a lot of talks, etc. Some of my poems got published in the Straits Times with Lee Kuan Yew's poetry tribute, which I wrote. And then I published my own book, the next collection, Masala Chai, Between Sips of Masala Chai in 2019. And I love studying, so I was studying in La Salle. I took a lot of poetry courses there. And then now I'm still studying. I'm doing an MA again at NTU, my second master's. Very different from the computers, which I did. I was working in the granddads of computers, which is called the mainframes. So mainframes and poetry, right? There's a huge difference. But then, well, that's life, and it's never linear. So I'm so happy to be here. Okay. So now looking at this slide, right, you must be thinking, what is this? Well, I want to make a big statement here that all of us sitting here are connected through poetry. Now, all of you will wonder, how is that possible? How are we connected through poetry, right? I mean, isn't poetry very niche and a small subset of a very small community? What poetry? Okay, but then, yeah. This famous nursery rhyme which we have, right? It happened very early on. And Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, it's actually a poem. It's a 5-stanza poem which was published in the book Rhymes of Nursery, and the author is Jane Taylor, and she wrote it in collaboration with her sister. Yeah? So we are all connected to poetry through our nursery rhymes. Okay, now, what brings us together? Well, there are a few things which I will be speaking on, the topic of my discussion, to know the role of poetry in building community. So let us begin by breaking the sentence down. Let us ask ourselves, what is community and what is poetry? And then I will try and link it back. Yeah. So what is community? What brings community together? Well, community is a place where we have a sense of belonging, share a common identity, have similar interest, and where there is social interaction. To be a part of a community is to have a safe space, to feel cared for, to connect, give, care for one another as a collective. But before we become a part of a community, we must start with ourselves and ask ourselves, who are we as individuals? And what is that we celebrate, we observe in our personal lives? And where can we have people of similar background and understanding? What is our heritage? What do we identify with? And we can assess the social constructs around us and how we can partake and belong. And then why poetry? Well, poetry makes us go within ourselves to see who we truly are, to face our emotions, recollect our past, celebrate our present, and to bring forth our imaginings. It helps us navigate through our daily experiences, even the fleeting ones, trying to make a sense of the ephemeral world around us through our individual lenses. Poetry is that branch that one can hold on to when life and its currents attempt to sweep us or drown us. It is that leafy shade that creates for our beleaguered selves to stop by, take refuge, and allow ourselves a few deep breaths. Poetry, with its prismatic quality, can inspire and reflect, love and hate, slam and embrace and wreck and build and shun and admire, be meditative, be forgiving, can historicize and antagonize. Poetry is as much for activism as it is for peace. Okay. Poetry and the mind. The impact of poetry on the mind was established way before we became aware of what is poetry, and way before we started getting scared and intimidated by poetry. The process started literally in the cribs. Now, this is a very interesting study which was conducted by the International Arts and Mind Lab for Applied Neuroaesthetics by the Johns Hopkins Medicine University. And what does it say? 21 Finnish newborn babies were made to listen to regular speech, music, or nursery rhymes. Only the nursery rhymes produced a significant brain response when the rhymes were altered. So they altered the rhymes of the nursery rhymes, and the baby's brain recorded a change in the brain signal. I was mind blown when I heard that. That is the power of poetry, and that is how it has impacted us since we were very young. Poetry as an egalitarian form. It encourages many perspectives. It is a great demonstration of diversity. Poetry is a space that bypasses cultural boundaries and restrictions. It is vital, liberating, and cathartic. Unlike other genres of writing, poetry is extremely unifying, as it allows for groups and group practices to be set up to encourage reading, writing, listening, and sharing. One doesn't need any special equipment, just a pen and a paper and your heart. That's it. So, poetry is condensed art form, a genre of writing that uses words with economy and appeals to the readers on those set of few words and the impact it has. It is the most distilled version of arts where the reader connects to the poet as well as the fellow readers through the shared emotions. The healing balm of verse. Poetry helps to heal ourselves. The kaleidoscope of emotions that weigh us down, the baggages we gather and we carry, the should have and could have we deal with every day. Poetry can help us get deeply intimate with our own self. Now, Robert Carroll is a psychiatrist at the University of California, Los Angeles, and he uses poetry as therapy. And he, in fact, asks all his patients to bring poems, whichever, whether they are written by the patient itself or some other poems. And then they study the poems together, and that helps him to go into the mind of the patient. So poetry is that therapeutic in its outreach. So poetry as an enabler to unite communities. The very act of creating and writing, reading and sharing your words is empowering to the poet and the community as a collective. Poetry can be a tool to reach various sections of the society, and it can provide insights and help showcase diverse voices, break stereotypes and social prejudices. Now, this is a YouTube video which I'm going to be playing. It's a poet, a winner, a prize winner, and you have to listen to the poem. It's in Tamil, but it's also translated into English. And he won the Migrant Poetry Competition in 2020, and it was featured in the Straits Times by Olivia Ho. And if we can play that, and then we see. Yeah.
உலக தமிழர்களுக்கும் தமிழ் அன்னைக்கும் என் முதற்கண் வணக்கம். கூடவே சக போட்டியாளர்களுக்கும் என் வணக்கங்கள். எனது பெயர் ராஜேந்திரன் விஜயகாந்த். கவிதையின் தலைப்பு தேக்காவில் பொம்மை வாங்குவோம். எப்போதுமே பொம்மை கடை ஒரு விசித்திரத்தை கொண்டுள்ளது. விளையாட்டு பிள்ளைக்கு வாங்க இந்த பொம்மை சரியாக இருக்கும் என ஊகித்துவிட்டு கூடவே கையில் கிடைக்கும் பொம்மைகள் எல்லாம் தடை பார்க்கிறேன். துப்பாக்கி ஒன்றை எடுத்து வாஞ்ச தீர சுட்டு பார்க்கிறேன். நாய் பொம்மை ஒன்றை தூக்கி பார்த்தேன். எந்திர மனிதன் சாவியை திருகிவிட்டு எப்படி பேசுகிறது என்று பார்க்கிறேன். மகிழ்ந்து ஒன்றை கண்ணாடி வலையில் ஓட்டி பார்க்கிறேன். குரங்கு பொம்மை ஒன்றை அதன் கையில் வைத்து இந்த வாழைப்பழத்தை பிடுங்கிவிட்டு அழ வைத்து பார்க்கிறேன். வானூர்தி ஒன்றை பறக்க செய்து பார்க்கிறேன். பூனை ஒன்றை மியாவென்று கத்த வைத்து பார்க்கிறேன். மாடு ஒன்றை நடக்க வைத்து பார்க்கிறேன். புலி ஒன்றை பயத்துடன் மெதுவாக தடவி பார்க்கிறேன். மெதுவாக தொட்டு பார்க்கிறேன். கடைசியில் என்னை மறந்து நானே குழந்தையாக மாறி நிற்கிறேன். எதை வாங்க வேண்டும் என்பதை மறந்து. உண்மையில் ஓரிடத்தில் இருக்கும் இந்த பொம்மைகளுக்குள் எந்த பொறாமையும் இல்லை. புலி வேட்டையாடவில்லை. துப்பாக்கி யாரையும் சுடவில்லை. நாய் கடிக்கவில்லை. பூனை பாலை திருடவில்லை. மாடு கன்றை தேடவில்லை. குரங்கு சேட்டை செய்யவில்லை. எந்திர மனிதன் எந்த வேலையும் செய்யவில்லை. மகிழ்ந்து யாரையும் ஏற்றி மகிழ்விக்கவில்லை. நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
That was very, very touching. So apparently it was a visit to a Tekka shop inspired the construction engineer, Rajendra Vijayakant. And seeing the toys on display, the tigers, cows, cats, and cars, reminded him of the idols of his childhood. It was a far cry from his working life in Singapore, where he had been there for 7 years. I began to play with them, he said, and I forgot myself. And one of the judges, eminent poet Dr. Alvin Pang, says, I find also that just because something is simple doesn't mean that it is simplistic. Some of the winning poems look quite simple on the page, but when you listen to them, when you read them carefully, you realize that there are a lot of things going on behind the surface. And I think his poem really brought that out, because we can all empathize. We all had a childhood, and we have all played with toys, right? Poetry landscape in Singapore. Well, we have 3 notable ones here: Poetry.sg, Singapore Remo, and Poetry Festival Singapore. Poetry.sg is an online database, and their mission is that they hope to be the first online venue that people think of when they think of Singapore poetry. Be they the scholars seeking critical analysis, teachers looking for rich multimedia resources to engage their students, or just a curious lit lover wanting to find out more about a poet they came across. Singapore Remo. It is a Singapore Poetry Writing Month, which happens annually during April, both on Instagram as well as on social media, that is Facebook. And you have perennial veterans and enthusiasts, poetry enthusiasts, emerging poets who tackle a prompt every day. Yeah, at the stroke of midnight. I think they've changed it now to 10 o'clock in the night. But they drop a prompt, and everyone in the Facebook group starts writing a poem. And then you have to upload it. And then you have mods, junior mods and senior mods who will comment, and the entire poetry community comments on your work. Yeah, I was a part of it, and I still enjoy going back to that. And as of end September, it has 7.6K members under its umbrella. That is the outreach of poetry. Poetry Festival Singapore. It is a registered society and it runs an eponymous multilingual festival every year during the last weekend of July. And it plans and organizes literary events in the island's 4 national languages. It features multilingual poets, readings, panel talks, and poetry competitions. And it is enabled by the National Arts Council's presentation and participation grants. Some fun stuff with poetry, yeah? People can argue that writing is a solitary process that requires a lot of self-introspection and, solitude. Oh, I'm writing, I can't talk to anybody, okay. True, but the portable nature of poetry is such that it becomes an enabler for groups to foster ties, cutting across race and cultures and make grounds for collective learning. The interaction between established poets, emerging poets, and poetry enthusiasts is facilitated in such settings. And knowledge is exchanged. Awareness is generated and very organically. No one says, hey, I want to come and become aware, okay? So I'm joining. No, it just happens. It happens because you're surrounded by people around you who are very different. But then you're united through poetry. Yeah? And it is so much fun. I was a part of all these. Yeah, we went on the MRT, we went on the bus, and we read poems. So it was a lot of fun. I hope Joshua Epp is listening, and he can organize such events in the future also. And poetry, through its philosophical breadth and depth, becomes an enabler for meaningful community interactions. The community as a collective becomes more advanced and more mature and more empathetic and wiser. And everyone together. This is, poetry landscape in Singapore. As we continue, we have the Migrant Writers of Singapore and the Open Mic Spoken Word Organization. They conduct, on the left, this is the literary group which is set up by the migrant workers. And they conduct photography sessions, podcast sessions, writing competitions, poetry competitions, etc. It's a very vibrant group. And we are very lucky to have them. And they also participate with full enthusiasm along with PFS. And on the right is the Open Mic Spoken Word, which holds open mic for the seasoned poets as well as for enthusiasts. And then they have an upcoming event, I think, coming up soon. Every month they have some events. Coming back to Poetry Festival Singapore, we have a lot of notable outreach over the years. We have the Chinese recitation competition, which happens across all age groups. We have interdisciplinary showcases. We have the national poetry competition in all the 4 languages, and students, small, young, and the adult categories. Then this year we had the national poetry recitation competition in the inaugural edition in English category. And we also have the biennial Singapore Literature Conference. And as of this year, that was the number. It's astounding, right? That is the outreach of poetry. These are some snapshots of the Poetry Festival Singapore. We recently concluded it in August. You can see. So on the left, we have the National Poetry Recitation Competition, English, primary, and open category. And that is the Chinese recitation competition. We have Professor Edwin Thambu, who has always been such a supportive figure for poetry in Singapore. And we are indeed blessed to have him with us. Reaching across communities, Poetry Festival Singapore does a lot of work. It had a collaboration with Arts and Meta, and we held an exhibition at the Arts House featuring artworks by the special needs artists. And so Poetry Festival Singapore really believes in bringing communities together, right? I mean, we do not want to have communities which are marginalized and just sitting there without any interaction. And poetry helps that. It is an enabler. We had poets who responded to these striking artworks through their own multilingual poems, which included Chinese, Tamil, Malay, English, and Chin. A migrant worker wrote in her native language of Chin, which is a Burmese dialect. And last year, we also had an interfaith poetry reading, and poets representing different faiths read their poems. In fact, we also had a female rabbi who read a poem. So that's amazing. Well, we also had COVID coming in, right? And COVID was, but we still continued, and we had a lot of online readings. On the left is the tribute to healthcare workers. We organized a multilingual, multi-generational reading. A lot of the noted poets in Singapore, Dr. Lee Zupeng, Joshua Ip, Waikith, Professor Robert Yeo, some migrant workers. Dr. De Cheng was there also. We had some migrant workers also. We had members from the open category. We had nurses. We had a doctor between us. And that's all of us masked up. Yeah, some of us couldn't make it in person, but those who came in, we had Miss Kumaria, yeah, she's here with us. She also read a poem with us. That was amazing. Yes. And then this is the interdisciplinary arts and community building. To the left is a Chinese art, which was created in response to poetry. And we have the very talented artist who wears many hats with aplomb, Dr. Chile, sitting here, right here. And that was a Chinese art he created for a poem I had written called The Window Period. Yeah. Oh, I have not changed the slide. I'm so sorry. Yes, the one on the left here. You can see the artwork on the left. Then on the right is Dr. Eric Wallace. He's the PFS director, and he's reading his poem, and that is the calligraphy, which was again done by Dr. Chile. And in the center, you can see we had a ekphrastic poetry reading, which was based on artworks by noted artist Mr. Kumar. The minister, Josephine Chia, was there as a chief guest. And we all read poems on the Singapore River, because all his artworks were on Singapore River, and it was amazing. It was held at the National Library. This is establishing ties with my international communities, a little bit of my drum roll here. I'm a part of the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, so we had a session there. I'm also happy to be featured in all the 3 issues of the Yearbook of Indian Poetry in English. It's a worldwide anthology which is collected across the Indian diaspora, and I'm so glad to be featured there. This is another, continuing my drum roll, an online festival of friendship which was held in the US. A Grammy Award winner, Richard Daniel Poor, had composed a music piece. And we were 2 poets from Singapore, myself and Dr. Lee Zupeng. And they had reached out to us to write a poem in response to the musical piece. And they had given us a key, and it was we could unlock the piece and listen to it. So this was all during COVID times. And I would go for my daily walks and listen to it and plug it in, and then you write the poem. And it was played in their radio. We were hoping that we would go to the US, but of course, pandemic. And on the right is a twin cinema, which I had written for the tribute to healthcare workers. It's translated into Japanese by the Kyoto Writers Residency. So, well, so poetry as a pulse of the local community. Here you can see a lot of books which are published, anthologies which are published. Poetry with its evocative quality can act as a pulse of the community, and it can gather readers around traditions and beliefs, languages and cultures, and social issues like migration and climate change. Talking of climate change, we are seeing haze today again, right? And these are small snapshots. Food Republic, which has poems on the durian and gulab jamun, and soft-boiled and very interesting poems. Then you have Love and Life at the Gallery, which is artworks at the National Gallery, and poets responded to them. We have nature poems From Walden to Woodlands. We have the Prata Journal, which is an interdisciplinary journal that fosters communities of theory and practice. We have the Best Asian Poetry. We have QLRS, which is the online literary journal founded by poet To Sian Min. And we have a Sing Bowl and the Singaporean poetic forms, which are introduced by Eric Wallace and Desmond Conn, two very noted poets and editors. They introduced these two forms, and then we had the anthologies called the Anima Methodi and a Sing Bowl there. Yeah. And it was very exciting. A Sing Bowl is a poetic tweet which you write in description to something. So, yeah. Coming to the challenges of poetry, and well, as with everything, we have challenges. So we have AI, and where are we headed? And books are being used without permission to create algorithms. And will AI then replace us in community gatherings? I don't know. I think none of us know what is going to happen. So we have to just wait and watch. But we should remember that we are tied by emotions, and AI doesn't have emotions, as of now, at least. Funding and grants, we are always looking for more funding so that we can have greater outreach as a community. Then we need to keep embracing and to go past the stigma attached to confessional poetry and to allow people to be who they are. And poetry is a beautiful tool to allow people to be who they are. We should have some greater movements across various disciplines of the art and have more involvement of the corporates in the art so that we don't have corporates and art. No, we can have interdisciplinary. Yeah. And coming to this last one, poetry binds and rekindles community spirit. Well, across the world, poetry has been recognized as a genre that has the ability to link and bind seamlessly with other art forms. And in a notable move in 2016, the Nobel Prize in Literature was awarded to Bob Dylan for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. But nothing can be a more apt display of the role of poetry and arts in community building here in Singapore. This is a photo of the original score of Majula, Singapore, exhibited at the National Museum, and the photo is by Josephine Poe. And the original is displayed where? At the Malay Heritage Center. Yeah. It was composed by Zubir Said in 1958 for official functions, and then it was adopted as a national anthem in 1965. So to conclude, from ancient times, man has been attuned to rhythmic qualities of poetry. Verses are easy to learn, pass down in comparison to long discourses and prosaic speeches like what I am giving right now. And poetry through generations has been adopted across the arts. So we hear the rhythms and the meter and the beat in army cheer songs, in theatrical plays of Romeo and Juliet and the likes, in national anthems and the holy verses of the scriptures. And they all have one thing in common, the rhythm of the words, poetic, simple, evocative, and memorable. Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. Right, so indeed, there's something special about poetry, yeah? And okay, I invite you to sit down first. I will invite everyone back up again when we discuss, when we have our Q&A. So indeed, poetry and literature can touch one's soul, right? Even lyrics to the song is poetry, right? But writing poetry is one, right? That requires some form of, flair. You must be able to express yourself. But understanding and reading poetry is another. It requires some form of understanding. Not everyone understand poetry. The way I understand a poem is different from another person's understanding of the poem. And again, that is diversity in understanding as well, because you are colored by your own experiences, your own context and all that. So that's the beauty of poetry and literature as well. Yeah. Okay. Right. So next we have Associate Prof. Tan Chile, who will be sharing with us about how arts and culture can play a role in community building and education. Associate Prof. Tan is the Deputy Head of Asian Languages and Cultural Academic Group at NIE NTU. He was a former tutor of the Chinese Language Elective Program at Hwa Chong Junior College and Executive Director of the Singapore Centre for Chinese Language, a prolific writer of various genres AP Tan Chile has published almost 30 books of academic writing, poetry, children's picture books, short stories, and prose. Prof. Tan, please. I think I will take a seat below because I'm coughing and it's quite distracting, so I will head down, yeah?
I thought Liana is going to join me. I'm so lonely up here. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted, honored to be welcome to this presentation. This is, well, the third time they're asking me, to be very frank. The first and the second time I was away. But I'm very glad that I'm here. And I have to say that I wish to sit down because I'm the Sembang and they are the Ilmu. Right, correct. So I'm the Sembang here. So I'm just going to be very frank and talk a little bit about my own experience in art making, culture creation. I've been involved in this for very, very long, ever since I remember, since I come back from overseas studies for my undergraduate. So anyway, yep, that's the title given to us. But I'm going to approach this from my own perspective, my own, very own experience. Can we just, I use this. Yeah. I started to deal with art and community building when I first came back to Singapore after my studies in Taiwan. I had my undergraduate in Chinese studies over there. There was a very free society during that time, in the 90s. So when I came back to Singapore, I found that we don't have all these things here. When we don't have this, I was asking my friends, so how can we create a sort of a community that's interested in art and Chinese culture and so on? So they said, well, since we don't have, then why not we make use of the internet, which just started during that time. I came back in 96 and internet was just about to begin. We started to have Web 1.0 and we realized that it is free. So we created a page called the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal Online. It is one of the very first Chinese literature, culture website created by a few friends, all from Chinese department, came back from overseas, some from local university, and then we just put it online. It was reported in the papers saying that, our young people are publishing journals online and for free and so on. So this is where I began. Well, today, when I try to search for this website, it is nowhere in sight. You see, you look at the website's URL, the members.zoom.com. I don't think there's even a zoom.com website anymore. But during that time, it is where we all began. A lot of us. I don't know about any of you, but it forms a small community. People who are interested in Chinese literature, culture, and wants to write about it and want to put it into a place where people can see and for free. And that's where we begin. That's only in Chinese. Then, after Chinese, we think, can we have something more? We have communities. We start to build a small community in Chinese. And we think, but we don't know any of the Malay counterparts, the Indian counterparts. And even the English writing counterparts. So we decided maybe we could do something more. It's also from a gap, because we have this gap of not having this community. So we decided to start off with a bilingual Singapore Student Literary Award. It started in 1999, when again, a few of us ask around, do you know any of the English writers? No. We asked our students, do you know any of the people who are writing in English? Well, they said no. So, okay. So we decided to create a literary award. I wrote a proposal, sent it to NAC, and astonishingly, surprisingly, they gave us quite a big amount to start this competition, which is called the Singapore Student Literary Award, and it's bilingual. It's Chinese and English. And these are the various stints of the award, starting from 1999. I think we have got 4 years of Student Literary Award. And I'm happy to say that some of the students who won the award during that time are actually still writers today. So when you don't have something like this during that time, and you created it, and now you see, oh, they're still writing, and probably because of that award. Yeah. I think building community through art is something like giving other people a voice, providing a channel for their voice to be heard. And so these website, the Grand Canal website, the Singapore Student Literary Award website, are all avenues for people to be heard, are all voices coming together. And when voices come together, you form a sort of a community. You sort of even form a harmonious kind of orchestra slowly together. So these are some of the posters, postcards that we have for that award. Some of the very nice postcards. So that was more than 20 years ago. Sorry. About the award. Yeah, it was launched in August 2000 to promote English and Chinese writing among the student population. You always have to find an organization, and I was quite fortunate to be supported by my own alma mater, the Hwa Chong Junior College alumni, and so on. So the difficult part is always to find all this. And the easier part is actually for the people to write, to create. Yeah. So you do the difficult part and let the students write. I think that is what we are doing. A lot of us, we decided to be part of this community building effort because we want to create that avenue for people to have their voice heard. So creating this award was one of my earliest experience, which I think slowly morphed into different things later in life. So I did this for 4 years until I quit from MOE and went overseas for my postgraduate studies. It is a pity that we couldn't continue. Of course, again, funding is one thing and so on, but we started it. And it could be continued later in our different ways, which I'm going to touch on. And we have this. Shilpa has talked quite a lot about this, so I probably will just talk about the history. When 10 years ago, right, 10 years ago, Prof. Edwin Tambu summoned a few of us, Chinese writer, Malay writer, Tamil writer, and English writer, to his office. You know, Prof. Edwin Tambu is emeritus professor. He still has an office in NUS. So I remember going to his office for the first time. And Azhar, myself, Eric, Lata, and Michelle, right? And he told us that 50 years ago, back when Singapore was just got independent, had got a lot of this multilingual, multicultural programs going on. But it happened that in that 50 years, things changed. And we couldn't really find some multilingual, multicultural literary programs as easily as 50 years ago, which is strange because now we can use English to speak to each other. We are actually able to communicate more easily as compared to 50 years ago. So he sort of pushed us. He dragged us into forming the community to form the Singapore Poetry Festival as a society. Having one representative of each language make it easy because we are able to find resources from our own network in that language, and at the same time being in that community. It's a small community, but a small group, but it helps when we are there and we can help each other, because if we want a multilingual program, it's very easy. We just send a WhatsApp and everyone will just respond. Immediately you form a multilingual group, a program. It's not that easy in other places, in other programs, if any one of you have tried. I've been in more structured programs like the NAC Writers Fairs and other things and so on. I found that the very informal kind of society that we have in Poetry Fest Singapore allow us to interact more freely and to able to create this Poetry Fest in such an organic, very interactive, multilingual, multicultural manner. This is what you have seen just now in Shilpa's. And then we have different tracks for our program. For example, the Chinese track. But in each of our track, it helps when we are able to bring in writers or poets from other languages. For example, this, although it's in Chinese, it's actually, there are some programs which are multilingual. And some programs that we work with less advantaged students. This is what we worked with the Shine Society. Shine is an organization that work with disadvantaged youngsters. And we decided to have that was during the COVID period, so it's actually on Zoom, where there's a drawing together with poetry writing, sharing with Ko Pak Song and myself. So it's Chinese and English again, with less advantaged students. And this is one of the programs that we had a few years back. It's called The Strokes, handwritten poems by the multilingual poets. So the Chinese poets would write in Chinese calligraphy, some of the Malay poets in Jawi, and the Tamil poets, the English poets. So we have a lot of all this handwritten. So it's actually an exhibition putting all of this together in the Arts House under Poetry Fest. And this, I have to say, is actually the first Poetry Fest Singapore. The first one, which happened 9 years ago. I always remember this. That's the opening when, before the opening, we decided, since we call ourselves the Multilingual Poetry Fest, should we actually write something really multilingual? So, what happened was we each write one stanza in our own vernacular language, but we learn to recite in another language. So I remember I was reading Tamil, learning from Latha. And I think Azza was in Chinese, learning from me or something like that. Yeah, so, you create this opportunity for people from different races, ethnic group, coming together, celebrating art and culture. I think we should have more of this, because it is not that difficult in Singapore, because we have that common language. And that's some of the photographs a few years back. Aziza is there, Azza is there, and Shilpa joined us later. And then not only with only poetry, but also in other genres, in other art form. For example, we work together with a filmmaker, young filmmaker from NAFA or LaSalle. For example, like this. This is my poems adapted into a short film by Ong Lien Ren. He created, so although it's a Chinese poem, when he adapted into a film, it cut across languages. There's very little conversation in there, so it can be understood by all languages. Things like this, art and culture, bring people together and bring people from various disciplines together. I searched online, I found this. So art, of course, is being well documented in Singapore, especially a few years ago during SG50. And then I was quite shocked to say that, it actually has become books to help people pass their GP and history exam. So in this collection, I helped to write one of those books on literature. So it's actually one of the books in the Chronicles, edited by Prof. Kotai An, with literature in Chinese, English, Malay, and Tamil. And you can see, this is actually, it could be considered part of Singapore, because this is various aspects of Singapore's history, society, art, culture, and so on. So just a very short, small volume it represents such a rich Singapore culture. Oh, sorry. Of course, there are other books that celebrate Singapore's community. This is published, I think, last year, edited by Kobak Song. I was one of the writers there. And the title says it all. One united people. But as you can see, the one is made up of so many individuals. And also art and culture, where each and every one of us carry into that one united people. Yeah. I'm coming to things that I do this few years. In recent years, I also start to be dabble into an online YouTube and Facebook channel. This is called The Very Nanyang. 十分难养, Very Nanyang. What happened was we decided to start a web page under YouTube and Facebook, saving all the videos that I've taken over the years when we visit art exhibition or when we interview people. So this is actually done by my friend and myself, just two of us. It started when we first went to Chen Wenxi's house. Chen Wenxi, of course, is the famous Chinese artist. So his former residence was still around. And in that residence, let me see whether I have that. In that residence, you can see, the right corner, that is the mural on his wall, that he's painting on the wall. So we were so amused by that residence. We decided to immediately video the entire place, the residence. The next day, after we have filmed it, the place started to be pulled down. So it gave quite a big shock to us because we know it's been sold, and then immediately this place is being pulled down. And you know, in Singapore, we cannot keep residents. Well, not even LKY's residents. So we cannot keep residents, but we can keep it in videos. So we decided to, since then, to find ways to capture residents of artists, important people. So a few of the residents that we have visited and filmed are sold after we film. So it's actually a kind of preserving Singapore's culture, right? So the right That's Chen Wenxi's house, and we film it immediately. That is the gate of the second one is the gate of Chen Wenxi's house. If you look carefully within the gates, actually there are a lot of very nice patterns, and that's the artist at his creation. Sorry. Okay. Things like this are what I'm doing right now, trying to capturing and preserving, keeping culture under a website. So this include paintings, exhibitions, even music and bonsai. The one on the right is a bonsai master in Singapore, and not many people know about that. Not many people know that actually we have bonsai master. He happened to be my neighbor, and surprisingly, and the family saw our video and commissioned us to actually did up this video for the bonsai master who has passed away. But the bonsai is there, it's still around. So bonsai has been around for 50 years. So we capture all the bonsai in the house. So that's what I'm doing. And there are many different programs that I'm part of, and some of you are here are part of as well. Like returning multilingual poetry reading with calligraphic performance earlier this year. Azhar was there. Lata was there. Poetry Fest people are there. We recite in multilingual poetry. We write calligraphy when they recite and play music and so on. So these are the things that we bring people together. And I thought we can remember all this fondly even after many, many years, right? Not only that, I'm interested in art. So there are many, many societies in Singapore. And this actually is traditionally a Chinese painting, calligraphy, and seal carving society called Xiao Tao. So very recently, we had this exhibition in SMU, and the theme is called Carving Possibilities. So when you say carving possibilities, you can cut across languages, cut across different communities. And the ones on the right are my works. Can you see what it's about? They are stones, right? Stone carving, very, very long stones, something like a mic. On the stones, I just carve some small little white squares, and paint them into white. And can you tell what it is? They become flats. Flats are the buildings that's closest to our heart, and that represents Singapore's community. And it's actually could be understood by anyone, because in the past, of course, Chinese still is made of Chinese characters, but now we could create things like this, and everyone is welcome to be part of this, to create this. And there are other programs where I don't have enough time. Do I still have enough time to talk about them? How much more time? 3 minutes. Okay. There are other programs, of course. I feel that there are more in recent years where there are multilingual programs and things like this. We went to Esplanade and together with music, poetry, we actually recite in different languages, Chinese, Malay, English, in August this year. Or even, this is a Chinese newspaper's headline, sometime in July, whereby we flew 7 satellites into space this year. And on one of the satellites is a poem. That's the first time a poem is being flown on satellite into space. And because the satellite is my friend's, so the poem is mine. I wrote about community actually in that poem about this poem going to space, looking back into us as a community. Although we is a very small, tiny island, but this satellite flying in space around the globe and coming by every 90 minutes. It's going to see us, and if you look up, probably you can just imagine it's just flying above us, collecting weather data, other data, and so on. But also, poetry is there. Yeah, so things like this are things that I do. Oh, the other one, of course, the last one is, Diana is also very familiar, Chinese database. Well, although we are doing Chinese stuff, although I'm doing Chinese stuff, but I realized that a lot of things that I do is multilingual, multicultural, and brings people together. This is a Chinese database. We research on 1,000 Singapore terminology, okay, of phrases that is very specific to Singapore. It's not used in China and other places. So we collected it. We look for the sources. We understand why we have such phrases. So things like sha tie. So can you imagine what is this? It started from Malay, of course, satay. So in Chinese we call sha tie. We call 德士 because of the word taxi. And so many different things is because of translation, because of the phrases that we have, because of Malay, we call it pasar. Why do we call pasar? Pasar is market, because it's pasar. There's so many interactions in the words that we use, that our community, if in silo, will not understand that it's actually just from our neighbors, from our friends, our community. So this is the things that I'm doing, and so it's actually part of my research, but research in culture and art and language, but it's also forming a national identity, a national community. So that's all I want to share. The things that I've been doing over the past 20, 30 years, everything is about art. I didn't start off with trying to build a community, but if you do well in your art, in your culture building, the community will come. With this, I thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Tan.